Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, accompanied by Secretary William Cohen, Lieutenant General Benjamin Davis, Jr., Colonel William Campbell, and Elnora Davis McClendon. Please remain standing for the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
If you'll all be seated. President Clinton, members of the Cabinet, Senator Robb, Senator John McCain, whose legislative efforts helped us to make this day possible, members of the Joint Chiefs, Service Secretaries, Service Chiefs, General Davis and Mrs. McClendon, the legendary Tuskegee Airmen, Janet, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. The President and I are truly proud to be able to host this gathering today, and I thank you, Mr. President, for your presence here on this very, very special occasion. The poet Langston Hughes once wrote that America is seeking the stars. America is seeking tomorrow. You are America. General Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., you are the best of America, and today America awards you a 4th star. General Davis is often held up as a shining example of what's possible for African Americans. But today we honor him not only as a great African American, we honor him because, like his father before him, he's a great warrior, a great officer, and a great American. The Tuskegee Airmen, who stand in our midst today, displayed incredible heroism in the skies of yesterday. And their record is as remarkable as it is renowned, never losing a plane that they were protecting to an enemy fighter in 10,000 sorties over North Africa and Europe. They were the first black squadron, and by their great and good fortune, they were led by then Colonel Davis. And in their first escort mission, he and 38 American fighters held off more than 100 German attackers. And perhaps their most spectacular mission, Colonel Davis led the Tuskegee Airmen on a 1,600-mile escort mission to Berlin. And until that day, the Allies had only shot down 2 of the new German jet fighters. But on that day alone, Colonel Davis and his Tuskegee Airmen, they downed 3. Throughout a lifetime of service in the Air Force, few did more than General Davis to prove that black and white Americans could not only serve together, indeed white soldiers would serve under a black superior, but that they could succeed together. Now, near my office in the Pentagon, there are several paintings of the Tuskegee Airmen, including one that celebrates the service of General Davis. In brilliant and bold display, they depict him and his wife Aggie, several of the fighters he has flown, and some of the bombers he once escorted. And the title is the last command that we hear from a flight leader as his formation dives into battle: drop tanks, follow me. Well, the Air Force and the entire United States military have heard General Davis calling "Follow me" for a half a century. And on a personal note, I'd like to say how moved I was by the interview that my wife Janet conducted with you, General Davis, on a program entitled Personal Diary some years ago. And I'll never forget the moment when she asked you about your now legendary experience at West Point, where for 4 years not a single classmate would speak to you except on official business. None would break the code of silence. But their silence could not break your spirit, because your pride and your patriotism and your love of country was deeper than the racism that was all around you. In Spartacus, you can find the comment that valor is common, but great souls are rare. You, sir, are among the rarest of souls. And as we acknowledge you with the pinning of this 4th star, so well deserved, so long in coming, you permit us to shine in your greatness. Now, before we hear from the Commander-in-Chief, I'd like you to hear from one of the warriors who flew alongside of General Davis. Colonel William Campbell was a Tuskegee Airman who flew 146 combat missions and went on to a distinguished Air Force career. He's earned 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses, the Bronze Star, the Legion of Merit, and 13 Air Medals. Ladies and gentlemen, it is truly an honor to present an airman, a patriot, and a great hero, Colonel William Campbell.
Thank you very much. I didn't do that to get some more applause. I really did it because they were worrying me, and I didn't want to be worried when I was up here. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and our many distinguished guests. It's really good to see so many friends and so many of the friends of the families of friends who are here on this historical occasion. Now, you may be wondering why I am the one Tuskegee Airman who gets to say anything during this entire program. I wondered the same thing. And I finally decided that maybe it was because I was the only living, I believe, Tuskegee Airman who was born and raised at Tuskegee Institute, Alabama. Well, if you were to pick up a starting point for what has brought us here today, it would be April 1939. In April 1939, Congress passed Public Law 18, which authorized the establishment or the activation of an air school to prepare black pilots for military service. The War Department, as it was called at that time, established also a training center for ground crews and other techniques at Chanute Field in Illinois. The War Department also established at the same time a training center for pilots at Tuskegee Army Airfield. Now, following this rather inauspicious beginning, we were called upon several times, we were called several things, some good, some not so good. Some of the more socially accepted names we were called were Lonely Eagles, Black Eagles, and the Tuskegee Flyers. Before World War II was over, however, the German pilots called us the Black Birdmen, Schwarzvogelmen. I think that's good. I don't know. And of course, most of you call us now the Tuskegee Airmen. We even have a logo. It's on each of the Tuskegee Airmen here has that logo on his name tag. The lead, it consists of a 3-tier formation flying against a background of clouds and the Air Force Star insignia. The lead aircraft at the top of the formation is designated 99 for the first squadron, black squadron in the United States Air Force, of which I was a member. The 99th Pursuit Squadron. Some of my other friends up here were not members of that squadron. The second aircraft in the middle of the formation is designated 332 for the 332nd Fighter Group. And the third aircraft at the bottom of the formation is designated 477 for the 477th Medium Bombardment Group. However, if it had not been for the 99th Fighter Squadron, the Tuskegee Airmen may never have seen combat. And the one person who made this possible against the strong tide of military resistance was General Benjamin O. Davis, who is being honored here today. Back in 1943, the 99th was sent to North Africa with then Lieutenant Colonel Davis as our commanding officer. We were segregated. We were assigned to a unit, a fighter group, but our field was 10 miles away. It denied us the opportunity to talk to people who had been there. Well, the policy at that time was to send, our policy all times really, to send unexperienced pilots with experienced pilots on their first 1 or 2 missions. Well, we did not get that either. Because of our inexperience, the commander of our group, the group to which we were attacked, recommended that we be assigned to coastal patrol. And our aircraft, which were probably the newest P-40s in the theater, be given to other P-40 units flying in the theater. This recommendation was supported up through the entire command from 12th Air Force over in Africa, right on to the Pentagon. And it was only really because of the eloquence of then Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, our commanding officer, in his defense at a meeting held at the office of the Secretary of Defense, that we, General Marshall, who at that time was Chief of Staff of the Army, turned down this request with the statement that we deserved a longer period than 60 to 90 days. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. Were it not for Benjamin O. Davis, his leadership and perseverance, there would have been no German plane shot down by black pilots. There would not have been 15,000 sorties flown by these pilots, and there certainly would not have been the distinction of never having lost a bomber to enemy aircraft. Now, that doesn't mean a bomber was not lost on missions in which we participated, but none to enemy aircraft, which was our job to protect the bombers against enemy aircraft. General Davis, I salute you, sir, for standing up in the firestorm of racial prejudice and never losing sight of the fact that this country is as much ours as anybody else's. The obvious success of the Tuskegee Airmen as a combat organization during World War II and their success during peacetime as a significant member of the Tactical Air Force, of the Tactical Air Command, could not have been achieved without your outstanding leadership and foresight. Not only do we have the right to enjoy life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, we also have the right to fight and die if need be. Now, at this time, I would like to present Colonel McGee and Colonel Crockett, who will give a red jacket to President Clinton as an honorary act.
Mr. President, on behalf of the men and women of the Tuskegee experience serving the Army Air Corps and those of the Tuskegee experience who went on to serve in the United States Air Force, we had determined that you're slightly out of uniform. And to do the task at hand today, to make you an honorary airman, we present on their behalf this red jacket. What do you think? Thank you. Thank you. Well, Colonel McGee, I think this is one of those days where I'm supposed to take orders. I am delighted to see you. I thank you and Colonel Crockett for the jacket. I can't help saying as a point of personal pride that Colonel Crockett is a citizen of my home state, Arkansas, and we go back a ways, and we were together not all that long ago in Cambridge, England, when we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the D-Day invasion, and we were there together. Colonel Campbell, I think you were picked to speak not because you were born in Tuskegee, but because you give a good speech. I think you did a fine job. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Let me say to all the Tuskegee Airmen here, we are honored by your presence and grateful for your service. I'd like to ask all the Tuskegee Airmen who are here just to stand for a moment so we can express our appreciation. They're out in the audience as well as here. Please stand here. Thank you very much. There are so many distinguished people here in the audience. Let me begin by thanking Secretary Cohen for his outstanding leadership. Janet, we're glad to see you here. Glad you did that interview with General Davis so many years ago. I thank the people from the White House who are here, General Carrick and others. The people from the Pentagon, Deputy Secretary Hamre, Secretary Caldera, Secretary Danzig, Acting Secretary Peters, General Shelton, all the Joint Chiefs are here today. I'd like to say a special word of thanks to Senator John McCain, the driving force behind the legislation to authorize this promotion. Thank you, sir. I also want to thank one of the finest supporters of our military and of this action in the United States Congress, Senator Chuck Robb, for being here. Thank you, sir. The leaders of the Veterans and Service Organization, members of the Armed Forces. There are many, many distinguished guests here, but I would like to mention two. First, a great American and former Secretary of Transportation, William Coleman, who's here. Thank you for coming, Mr. Secretary Coleman. And Matt Aide, his son, has served with great distinction in the Pentagon. We thank him for that. And I'd like to recognize Governor Doug Wilder from Virginia, who's been very actively involved and wrote an introduction to a book about General Davis. Thank you for being here. And we want to welcome Mrs. Elnora Davis McClendon and the family and friends of General Davis who are gathered here, and especially General Davis himself. Much of the distinguished record of General Davis and the Tuskegee Airmen has been mentioned, but I would like, for the record of history, for you to bear with me and allow me to tell this story and the story of this remarkable family. Today, we advance to the rank of four-star General Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., a hero in war, a leader in peace, a pioneer for freedom, opportunity, and basic human dignity. He earned this honor a long time ago. Our armed forces today are a model for America and for the world of how people of different backgrounds working together for the common good can perform at a far more outstanding level than they ever could have divided. Perhaps no one is more responsible for that achievement than the person we honor today. When the doors were shut on him, he knocked again and again until finally they opened, until his sheer excellence and determination made it impossible to keep them closed. Once the doors were open, he made sure they stayed open for others to follow. Some who followed are in this audience today. In 1899, General Davis's father, Benjamin Davis Sr., a skilled National Guardsman, sought entry into West Point. He was told no blacks would be appointed. Undeterred, he enlisted in the Army and distinguished himself immediately. In less than 2 years, he was an officer. Takes longer if you go to West Point. 20 years later, Colonel Davis was teaching at the Tuskegee Institute. The Ku Klux Klan announced it would march through the Davises' neighborhood. The Institute instructed its staff to stay indoors, turn out their lights to keep from provoking the marchers. But Colonel Davis refused. Instead, he put on his dress uniform, turned on the porch light, gathered his family. Theirs was the only light for miles, but they sat proudly and bravely outside as the hate marchers passed by. Benjamin Davis Jr. never forgot about his father's shining porch light. As a teenager, inspired by Charles Lindbergh's historic flight, he dreamed of becoming an aviator and a trailblazer. With hard work, he did gain admission to West Point, the very opportunity denied his father. The father saw that the son had the chance not only to serve his country, but to inspire African Americans all across America. Remember, he wrote, 12 million people will be pulling for you with all we have. But at West Point, as you have already heard today, Benjamin Davis was quite alone. For 4 years, fellow cadets refused to speak to him, hoping to drive him out. What they didn't realize, he later recalled, was that I was stubborn enough to put up with the treatment to reach the goal I had come to attain. His request to join the Air Corps upon graduation was denied because no units accepted blacks. Though he ranked 35th out of a class of 276, West Point superintendent advised him to pursue a career outside the Army. He refused. Arriving at Fort Benning to command an infantry company, he was again shunned from the officers' club, subject to segregation on and off the base. But times were changing as World War II dawned. Just as President Roosevelt promoted Benjamin Davis Sr. to Brigadier General, the first African-American general in our nation's history, he ordered the Air Corps to create a black flying group. Benjamin Davis was named its leader, and in the spring of 1943, the 99th Fighter Squadron departed for North Africa and began combat missions. Their group commander soon recommended they be removed from combat, however, claiming, listen to this, that a black American did not have the desire or the proper reflexes to make a first-class fighter pilot. Colonel Davis then proved he was just as skilled in the conference room as in the cockpit. His testimony, as you have so eloquently heard today, carried the day before a military panel, making the case for ability and bravery. The panel recommended that the 99th be reinstated and that more African-American squadrons be sent overseas. Returned to the skies, as we all know, the Tuskegee Airmen proved themselves again and again. They destroyed far more planes than they lost. They disabled hundreds of enemy boxcars. They even sank an enemy destroyer, a unique achievement in the war. And as you have heard twice now, during 200 escort missions above the Third Reich, they never lost a single bomber to enemy fire. The Tuskegee Airmen's extraordinary success and the invaluable contributions of other blacks and minorities in the war helped to turn the tide against official racism and to pave the way for President Truman's historic order 50 years ago, mandating, and I quote, equality of treatment and opportunity in the armed services. This led to an end of segregation in our forces. For 25 years after the war, Benjamin Davis Jr. rose to complex security challenges in Air Force postings, at home and abroad. Wherever he went, he overcame bigotry through professionalism and performance. Following his retirement in 1970, he continued his distinguished public service, including at senior positions at the Department of Transportation. I'd like to say something personal. A lot of these old-fashioned, almost amazing arguments against the capacity of black Americans were still very much in vogue during the Civil Rights Movement in the 1950s and the 1960s. And for children like me who were taught that the Civil Rights Movement was the right thing to do in the South, and who engaged in countless arguments against inane statements. You have to remember, we were raised in the generation right after World War II, and everyone recognized that everything about World War II, in our minds, was ideal and perfect and insurmountable and unsurpassable. The one stopper that any Southerner had in a civil rights argument was the Tuskegee Airmen. They will never know how much it meant to us. General Davis, through it all, you have had the steadfast support of your wife, Agatha, whom I know is home today thinking of you. You struggled and succeeded together. I think you all should know that in 1973, Mrs. Davis wrote to a cadet who had been silenced by his classmates, "I think I know what your life at the academy must have been. My best friend spent 4 years of silence at the point. From 1936, when I married that best friend of mine, until 1949, I too was silenced by his classmates and their wives. There will always be those who will stand in your way. Don't resent them. Just feel sorry for them and hold your head high." Like so many military spouses, past and present, this exceptional woman, an officer's wife who spent World War II toiling in a munitions factory, has worked and sacrificed to defend our freedom. And General, just as we salute you today, we salute her as well. When Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. became an officer, he was the only black officer in our Air Corps. Now, the Air Force has 4,000. Minorities and women remain underrepresented in our officer corps, but General Davis is here today as living proof that a person can overcome adversity and discrimination, achieve great things, turn skeptics into believers, and that through example and perseverance, one person can bring truly extraordinary change. So often today, America faces the challenge of helping to prevent conflicts overseas, fueled by these very divisions of race and ethnicity and religious differences. On Saturday, I am going on a mission of peace to the Middle East, still embroiled in such conflicts. We cannot meet these challenges abroad unless we have healed our divisions at home. To all of us, General Davis, you are the very embodiment of the principle that from diversity we can build an even stronger unity, and that in diversity we can find the strength to prevail and advance. If we follow your example, America will always be strong, growing stronger. We will always be a leader for democracy, opportunity, and peace. We will be able to fulfill the promise of our founders to be a nation of equal rights and dignity for all, whose citizens pledge to each other our lives, our fortune, our sacred honor, in pursuit of that more perfect union. I am very, very proud, General Davis, of your service. On behalf of all Americans, I thank you. I thank you for everything you have done, for everything you have been, for what you have permitted the rest of us Americans to become. Now, I would like to ask the military aide to read the citation, after which I invite General Davis's sister, Mrs. Elnora Davis McClendon, to join me in pinning on the General's 4th star. Read the citation.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated for the reading of the orders.
You read the order, and then you may stand up if you like.
Attention to orders. By direction of the President of the United States, the following named officer is advanced on the United States Air Force retired list to the grade of general under public law of the Strom-Thurmond National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 1999, effective 9 December 1998. To General, Lieutenant General Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., United States Air Force, retired.
Judge, ladies and gentlemen, when I came here this afternoon, I had no idea that the honors that have been leveled upon me in this room and to the United States Air Force, it is almost incomprehensible to me that I could have been here and not know anything about it. But that's exactly the way it was. I'm extremely proud to have been a member of the United States Air Force, and I'm also proud to have heard the words assigned to the Air Force for the position that they have made in their carrying out of missions that are of the first benefit to the United States. I did not come to make a speech. I will not make a speech, but I will say to you, ladies and gentlemen, that all of us owe great thanks to the United States Air Force for its contributions, which have been not only by them, but by all Air Force people. And I thank you very much.